Hello and welcome to the Hungaroring, where I'm here to drive the McLaren 600 LT, something I am quite excited about, I don't mind saying. And who wouldn't be? Because of course the LTs are the kind of hardcore track-focused end of the McLaren range. Originated with the F1 GTR back in the day, then with the 675 LT, and now with this 600 LT version of the Sports Series range. It's an evolution of the 570S. It's faster, it's lighter, it's more expensive in that LT way. I'll talk you through some of those details in a moment. But doesn't it look good? I really like the way this thing looks. I'm interested to see how it goes as well. I'm very excited about that. But before we do that, let's just talk through some of the details. So, Longtail, that is a very evocative McLaren name. In its literal translation, this car is 74mm longer than a 570S. That comes from some of the bodywork additions. It's also as much as 100 kilos lighter, although that does rather depend on how you spec the car. Dry, that puts it at about 1,247 kilos, about 100 kilos more din, so with fuel and ready to go. That's still pretty light, impressive. What other details can I tell you? Well, you'll notice from the starters, this big front splitter here. As you'd expect with McLaren, a lot of the kind of track-focused elements of this car are to do with aero, although unlike the Senna and the 720S, this is a slightly different prospect because of course the Sports Series uses slightly simpler suspension. It's a more, shall we say, raw car than some of those more tech-fest McLarens. It does benefit, however, from both the 720S and the Senna. So here we've got some super lightweight forged wheels, 10 spoke. They save a big chunk of weight. You'll see these little planes here. They help direct the flow down the side of the car. We've got ducts here on the front wing to release pressure from inside. Coming down the side of the car, slightly bigger side vents to feed the engine. Again, more aero trim elements here. It's a little bit wider than the standard 570S as well, not by much. 8mm lower in ride height, and they've kind of changed the balance with the springing a bit. They've made it quite a bit stiffer overall, but a little bit more stiffer at the back end and a little bit faster at the front. So hopefully it should be a bit more pointy on the track. Around the back here, we've got this, I really like this. So they've got this kind of cutout to reduce the pressure in the rear wheel arch, and then this side blade here. I think that looks really cool. We've got a fixed rear wing, and we have these super cool deck lid exhaust. I quite like that. It's a really distinctive feature, a bit like the 918 Spider, isn't it? And it's all functional as well, because from the cat's back, those pipes are only 30 centimetres. And that compares with over a metre of pipe work in the standard car. And that alone saves about 12 kilos. It's the pattern throughout the car. It's all about weight saving and making it sharper and all the rest of it. Now then, how much does this cost? Well, it's about £185,000, which is compares with about 150 grand for a 570S. Sports Series isn't all carbon fibre like the 720S, it's aluminium bodywork, but the LT, this is carbon, more of the bodywork is carbon than the standard one. This particular car as well gets the £24,000 MSO Club Sport package. That adds carbon fibre to the roof, to the buttresses here, to the back, and gives it a lot more presence, shall we say. This particular car has been optioned up quite significantly. The list price on this one is 250 grand, which is quite a big step up. It's actually more expensive than a 720S, but the character is supposedly going to be quite a lot different as well. We'll find out about that in due course. What else can I tell you before we get going? Well, I can tell you it's very hot here at the Hungaroring, so I'm not going to spend too long in here talking around. Things you will notice include these seats. Now they're part of the MSO Club Sport package as well. They're the super light ones from the Senna. I think they weigh only about 3 kilos or something like that, something ridiculous. And they're all part of the kind of weight saving ethos. The standard seat is lighter than what you get in a 570S as well. That is, I think, the same as the one from P1. So that saves 20 kilos of the standard seat. You get the picture, don't you? Weight saving, sharpening, all that kind of thing. Thankfully, this one has the air conditioning and things like that, because to get the full 100 kilo weight saving, if you want to go full hardcore, it comes as standard without aircon, infotainment, anything like that. You can option them back in for free. So if you want the full hardcore weight saving experience, you need to do without any of those extras. There's even an MSO Club Sport Pro package with a harness bar and all that kind of thing as well. So you can decide how hardcore you're going to go with your LT. maybe a mix and match approach, maybe some of the lightweight fittings, but I think I'll probably keep the aircon, particularly on a day like this. It does, in that McLaren way though, look super cool, very minimalist, lots of Alcantara. It feels a bit more special than a standard sports series, as perhaps it should do, given how much more it costs. How many are they going to make? Well, they're being a bit cagey. The official line is not more than 20% of the overall sports series production run. They haven't said how many they're going to make yet. Let's just say they made 500 675 LTs and 500 675 LT Spiders as well. So it's going to be in that kind of order. They are maintaining that this is for the few. So it's meant to be an exclusive car and kind of pitched accordingly. So that's the kind of quick run through of some of the features and some of the geekery. The track beckons. The most important thing is to see how it goes. Let's get out there. Right, so welcome to the Hungaroring and the 600 LT. I've talked you around a bit of the geekery relating to the car. Now we've got to see how it goes around this really testing track. I've not been here before, it's got a lot going on. So you'll forgive me if there are any breaks in the conversation as I try and remember which way it goes. So we've had a couple of sighting laps already in the 570S, and that's been really, really interesting to compare the cars back to back, because let's face it, the 570 is no slouch on the track. Even the GT, which I was lucky enough to run for 8,000 miles, including some on track at Silverstone, that was really impressive, and that's the kind of soft, squidgy, road optimised sports series, all things relative. But here we are in the most focused, track ready one, the LT. What am I noting in comparison to the 570S? Well, first of all, the steering. So it's only 4% faster by the numbers, and the rack's the same, but it's all just done through the steering geometry and things like that. But it's less about the steering itself and more about the balance of the car. So we're a lot stiffer at the back than we are in the 570. That means the front end's a lot more pointy, and the 570S is hardly mushy, but the way the LT reacts to your inputs is just, it takes a little bit of getting used to. Actually, the first time I came into the second, third corner around here, I actually oversteered, not in the cool opposite lock kind of way, but in terms of I actually put too much steering lock in, and rather than wash out wide, the front of the car just turned in and actually went a bit over the grass, which was unusual, but it just gives a sense of how much more bite there is in the front end of this car and how it's much more eager. Of course, the weight saving will play a part in that. We're 100 kilos less, or rather we would be if we were in the full stripped out spec without the air conditioning and the stereo. This one's got all that in, which I'm quite glad of today because it's pretty hot here at the Hungaroring. But you definitely feel that it's the kind of incremental gains, isn't it? So you've got less weight, you've got a sharper setup, and the car just flows this fast left-hander over the curbs. It just feels much more alert and agile. I'd be interested to see how it goes on the road, but here on the track, you drive the 570S and you think, how could this be better on a track? Because it's hardly a blancmange, but the LT just kind of pulls it all together. There's so much more reward, and I think if you're after a McLaren that you want to actually use on track, this is probably the one. It might actually even be more fun than the Senna, whisper it. It certainly is around here anyway, because the Senna's all geared up for downforce. Just to give you a sense, at 150 miles an hour, this car is developing 100 kilos of downforce. At the same speed, a Senna's delivering 800 kilos. So that kind of informs you about the character of the car. The LT is more about mechanical grip than aero grip, and that means that when it runs out, it's a more playful car. Certainly on a tight and twisty track like this, I think I'd probably be rather here in the LT than in the Senna, which sounds like a crazy thing to say because the Senna's a massively impressive piece of kit, but for the average driver I think the LT is probably actually more fun because you can play with it, because you can actually dial it around on the throttle with the weight lifts and things like that, and in that sense it's maybe a bit more like, I've always thought McLarens have felt quite Lotusy in the way they handle, and that's a compliment to both parties, by the way. And in that way, the LT feels even more like that. It just feels chuckable and playful and light and agile and goddamn fast as well. That's the thing. It's interesting that McLaren, on paper, you might put this car up against a Ferrari 488 Pista, but in fact, McLaren see that as more the job of the next 720 LT, if such a car ever comes, whereas this is really GT2 RS rival, that kind of level. So, and I can see that, and as much as the kind of willy waving about the big horsepower outputs, the lap times, all that kind of thing, in terms of actually enjoying a car on a track, I think this lightweight ethos, the simpler suspension, you don't have all the fancy tricksy anti-roll stuff going on, the hydro pneumatic suspension, this has got coil springs, mechanical anti-roll bars, it just feels analog. It's not really analog, is it? But it kind of feels that way. It has a more natural feel to it, a more chuckable thing. And if you're out for fun rather than lap times, I think this is probably the McLaren for you. It's an absolute ball. I love it. Can I have some more time, please?